So I'd like to begin by showing a few verses, talking about Krishna who comes again and again in every yuga. Why does he come? Well, he tells us in Bhagavad Gita 4.8, Paritranaya sadhuna vinashaya ch dushkritam dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. But actually, Krishna comes simply to enchant the hearts of any pure hearted or simple persons who hear about the pastimes he performs. Srila Shukdev Goswami explains this point in Canto 10, chapter 33, verse 36. When the Lord assumes a human like body to show mercy to his devotees, he engages in such pastimes as will attract those who hear about them to become dedicated to him. In Kali Yuga, Krishna comes as his own devotee. Where is the proof for that? There are multiple shastras that talk about this. I selected this verse. Krishna Varnam Visha Akrishnam Sangha Upanga Astra Parshadam Yagyahi Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumedasaha. This is from Bhagavatam 11.5.32. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. So Krishna comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Kali Yuga, as we saw from the previous verse. He's constantly chanting the holy names of the Lord and inducing everyone to chant in Kirtan, Sankirtana, congregational chanting. So he comes in 5 forms in Kali Yuga. Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita describes Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakhyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. Let me offer my obeisances unto Lord Sri Krishna, who has manifested himself in 5. Bhakta Rupa as a devotee, Lord Chaitanya. Bhakta Swarupakam as an expansion of a devotee, Lord Nityananda. Bhakta Avataram, whose appearance is today in the incarnation of a devotee, Advaitacharya. Bhakta Akhyam, known as a devotee, Shivas Pandit. Bhakta Shaktikam, the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Gadadhar Pandit. Who is Sri Advaitacharya? So we saw before he's described as Bhakta Avataram in the incarnation of a devotee. So Chaitanya Charitamrita describes who Advaitacharya is. And I will read the English. Lord Advaitacharya is the incarnation of Mahavishnu, whose main function is to create the cosmic world through the actions of Maya. Mahavishnur Jagatkarta Mayaya Yaha Srijati Adaha Tasya Avatara Evayam Advaita Acharya Ishvaraha. And then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami continues in the first chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita itself, 13th verse. Advaitam Harina Advaitad Acharyam Bhakti Shamshanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. Advaita means non-different. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he's called Acharya because he teaches by example. Acharya is one who teaches by example. He is the Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him, Srila Advaitacharya. So I will stop sharing now so I can see all of you. My pranams again to everyone. So this appearance day today is so joyful, and we will get into some aspects of Advaitacharya. Chapter 6 of Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita describes the glories of Advaitacharya. I do not have the time to discuss the entire chapter. It's a big chapter, But if people are interested today, they can read that chapter and meditate upon Sri Advaithacharya. But I want to touch on one key point that is brought out by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, in chapter 6 of Adi Leela. And that point is the joy of servitude or Dasya Bhav. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes in this chapter Lord Krishna, the one master and the Lord of the universe, is worthy of being served by everyone. Indeed, everyone is but a servant of his servants. That same Lord Krishna has descended as Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everyone, therefore, is his servant. I am a servant of Lord Chaitanya, a servant of Lord Chaitanya. I am a servant of Lord Chaitanya and a servant of his servants. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes that saying these words, Advaita Prabhu dances and loudly sings. Then at the next moment, he quietly sits down. The source of the sentiment of servitude is indeed Lord Balaram. So we have been hearing this series on Lord Nityananda that's going on every Saturday. The fourth session is day after tomorrow. And that series glorifies Lord Nityananda. And we hear how Lord Nityananda, Balaram, is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is the Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead. Just as Mahaprabhu is the supreme enjoyer, Nityananda is the supreme servitor, and he teaches everyone how to serve. So the source of all servitude is Lord Balaram. The plenary expansions who follow Lord Nityananda or Lord Balaram are all influenced by that ecstasy of serving. Lord Sankarshan or Balaram, who is one of the incarnations of Balaram, always considers himself a devotee. Another of his incarnations, Lakshman, who is very beautiful and opulent, always serves Lord Ram. The Vishnu who lies on the causal ocean is an incarnation of Lord Sankarshan, and accordingly, the emotion of being a devotee is always present in his heart. So, this is Mahavishnu or Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Karanodakshai Vishnu. From him come all the universes, all the multitude of universes emanate from Mahavishnu or Karanodakshai Vishnu, who lies on the causal ocean. And that Mahavishnu is an incarnation of Sankarshan, who himself is an incarnation of Balaram, who is an expansion of Sri Krishna himself. So Mahavishnu is the supreme Godhead, but he's a portion or an expansion of an expansion of an expansion. So Chaitanya Charitamrita describes that Advaitacharya is a separate expansion of Mahavishnu. He always engages in devotional service with his thoughts, words, and actions. By his words, he declares, I am a servant of Lord Chaitanya. Thus, with his mind, he's always thinking, I am Lord Chaitanya's devotee. So, Kaviraj Goswami declares that Lord Chaitanya has two principal limbs. One is Lord Nityananda and the other is Lord Advaitacharya. Devotees headed by Srivas Pandit are Mahaprabhu's smaller limbs. They are like his hands, face, and eyes, and his disc, his chakra, and other weapons. With all of them, Lord Chaitanya performed his pastimes, and with them, he spread his mission. Every incarnation of Krishna's, beginning with Nityananda Balaram, sees themselves as servants. So when you read chapter 6 of Adi Leela, you will see various examples from Shastra are given. I spoke about Lakshman, who appears in Ram Leela as the younger brother of Lord Ram. He is in the mood of servitude to Lord Ram, even though he himself is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's non-different from Balaram, but he sees himself as Lord Ram's servants. And it's explained how everyone in all parts of the creation, they see themselves, even the incarnations of Krishna, they see themselves as servants, of the Supreme Godhead, Krishna. Our constitutional position is to be a servant. So as Prabhupada always points out in his lectures and in his purports, we always have a choice every single day. In fact, every moment. I can be a servant of Krishna, or I can serve his material energy or Maya. So I can try to enjoy separately from Krishna, or I can serve Krishna. The choice is given to the living entity. That's the little free will that we have. But whether to be a servant of one of these two or not is not in our hands. So it's not like we can say, well, I don't like either proposition. I don't want to be a servant of Krishna, or I don't want to serve Maya. I just want to be me. I'm a good person, new age spirituality. I'm a good person. I believe in myself. Be yourself and enjoy life. There's no choice. The jiva is created either to be a servant of Krishna or to be a servant of Maya. So, as I mentioned, this chapter goes through multiple examples of how different incarnations of Krishna, even though they are the Supreme Person themselves, they all consider themselves to be Krishna's servants. And we hear about how the Braja devotees, the devotees in Vrindavan, are spontaneous devotees. They are in the mood of spontaneous bhakti, and they are in various mellows. They are in the mood of friendship, or they're in the mood of being Krishna's parents or his uncles and aunts, still parental affection, or the highest mellow, which is that they are Krishna's lovers. Even in that, they consider themselves to be Krishna's servants. So much so, you might think, well, Srimati Radharani, she's the topmost devotee of Krishna. She's the topmost lover of Krishna. She's at the absolute pinnacle. In fact, in this tradition of Krishna Bhakti, we worship Radharani even more than Krishna because we want to attract her mercy and attract her favor so that she can introduce us to Krishna and recommend us. And then Krishna, because he loves Radharani so much, will accept us. So even Radharani is described in the 10th canto as praying to him in the mood and actually calling herself his maidservant. So it's not just Krishna and Krishna's incarnations, but also all of Krishna's intimate devotees. Sure, Yogamaya does cover up the dasya bhav of the spontaneous devotees in Braj and gives them um, spiritual or divine forgetfulness of Krishna as God so that they can actually perform pastimes for the pleasure of Krishna as his friend or as his lover or as his parents. But that underlying mood is always there that I am the servant of Krishna. So Kaviraj Goswami goes on to describe the position of being a devotee is higher than that of equality with Krishna. For the devotees are dearer to Krishna than his own self. Lord Krishna considers his devotees greater than himself. And we see that in Bhagavatam as well, in the chapter on Ambarish Maharaj. Lord Narayan describes to Durvasa Muni that I am actually not independent. I am bound by the love of my devotee. So Krishna, Kaviraj Goswami is affirming he considers his devotees to be greater than himself. The sweetness of Lord Krishna is not to be tasted by those who consider themselves equal to Krishna. It is to be tasted only through the sentiment of servitude. So much so that Krishna, who is all knowing, is omniscient, he can know and feel everything, but he feels himself lacking in one thing, and that is why are my devotees, and specifically my topmost devotee, Radharani, so happy serving me? And he cannot experience that in his position of being God. So Krishna himself comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to taste the sweetness of being a devotee. And I've frequently heard examples of how a mother, when she is serving her baby, the baby is being waited on non-stop. Some of you might be mothers who are in the audience today. Excuse me. And you know this, that you wait hand and foot 24 hours on the baby. And as the child grows up, there is some independence, but you're still serving constantly. But if you were to find out who gets more pleasure, Is it the mother or the baby? The baby is just, you might look at the baby and think, what a life. Every little whim of that baby is being served by the mother. But actually, it's the mother who's getting the most pleasure, the most happiness. So to taste that sweetness and that happiness, Sri Chaitanya, Lord Krishna descends as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically to experience the mood of a devotee. He comes as his own devotee. Though, as they say, who can hide the sun? You cannot put a little lid on top of the sun and say, well, now I've covered the sun, and the sun may not, burn brightly or shine forth. So in Mahaprabhu's Leela, from time to time, you do see, he allows us to see his godhood, and he shows how he's the supreme lord himself. But then he becomes aware of it, and he becomes embarrassed, and he withdraws that, and he says, Vishnu, 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 I am just a servant of Krishna. I'm not God. So I'd like to tell a story of how desperately Advaitacharya wished for the position of servant of Sri Chaitanya. So Advaita Prabhu was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. Srila Madhavendra Puri was the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya's own guru, Srila Ishwara Puri, which means that he was a god brother of Mahaprabhu's guru. So, as is proper etiquette, Sri Chaitanya, who was always acting in the topmost position of being the best devotee because he wanted to teach by example, not just by words, Sri Chaitanya would always offer profound respect to Sri Advaita. And this would make Advaitacharya very, very sad. He would actually become distraught because Advaita considered himself to be Mahaprabhu's servant, not a venerable senior. Now, if you were to look at the life of Advaita Prabhu, he was 52 years senior in age to Sri Chaitanya. He appeared in the year 1434. Mahaprabhu appeared in 1486. So even from that point of view, Mahaprabhu offered him respects as a venerable senior. But Advaitacharya burned inside, and he was thinking, Mahaprabhu is engaging everyone else as his servant. Why does he give me respect? Why does he not treat me as a servant? He actually felt completely distraught. So he concocted a plan which would make Mahaprabhu drop his respect to Advaita Prabhu and accept Advaita as a servant. So the plan was like this. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he descended specifically to teach the process of Bhakti Yoga, where his first and foremost teaching was that every living entity is a servant of Krishna. So he's not, the living entity can never be equal to Krishna, and he can never be superior to Krishna. And the one thing that really infuriated Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the teaching of Mayavad, which is Mayavad teaching is that right now I may have fallen into this material world and this world of illusion, and I may be trapped by the powers and elements of Maya, but actually I am God. Over time, if I follow a particular process, and some of them even chant Hare Krishna, I will become God. So that's one aspect of Mayavad. The other aspect of Mayavad is that, they think that God is formless, that when he appears as in some form as Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he has taken on a material form and is subject to material elements and material power, just as every other living entity is. So both these aspects of Mayavad are most offensive because it's actually worse than atheism, because here you are completely denying Krishna's form, and even worse, you're denying your own constitutional position, which is Jivera Surupa Hoy Krishnera Nityadas, that you're eternally a servant of Krishna. And you're thinking that one day I will become God. So this principle of Mayavad was one thing that would infuriate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he wanted to destroy that wrong conception of Mayavad and bring everyone to the path of bhakti. So Advaita Prabhu, he devised a plan. He said, I will teach the principles of Mayavad openly. This news will eventually get back to Sri Chaitanya, and he will surely come and chastise me. So, saying this, Advaita Prabhu, who was a very respected teacher and he had taught the principles of Bhakti Yoga all his life, so in Shantipur, in his house, he started teaching to his students. He started teaching the philosophy of Mayavad. And he actually started saying that Bhakti is subordinate to Mayavad, and that eventually, one becomes God and God doesn't have a form, and so on and so forth. This news got back to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's described that at first Mahaprabhu laughed when he heard this because Mahaprabhu knew who Advaitacharya is. He's an expansion of his own form. So he knows he cannot teach Mayavad. There must be some purpose. But externally, because again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching by example. So he wanted to show that this was not correct philosophy and he wanted to correct it. So he and Nityananda, they got very angry and they were in Navadvip and they started running to Shantipur to go and confront Advaitacharya. And they swam across the Ganga and they appeared in the courtyard of Advaitacharya where he was teaching his students. And when Advaita saw them from the corner of his eye, he increased his voice and he started teaching even more vigorously about Mayavad being the supreme philosophy and that, Bhakti is subordinate and so on and so forth. And when Mahaprabhu saw this, he got furious. And in a very angry mood, he jumped on Advaitacharya and he started beating him. And he started crying out. Mahaprabhu started crying out. He said, you are teaching this bogus philosophy? He said, I appeared simply because of your prayers. You wanted me to come to this earth to deliver all the poor, ignorant fools who take birth in this age of Kali, in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Now, you, Advaita, are teaching a philosophy that denies my existence as the Supreme Person and denies that I have a form, and that form is the origin of everything, including the Brahmajyoti or the effulgence that Mayavadis worship. He said, what's wrong with you? And he started beating him and beating him. Advaitacharya, in his heart, was so pleased. He began to dance and he was joyful. He was throwing his arms around and saying, see, now you have thrown off your pretense. See how my desire has been fulfilled. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he declared to everyone, Mahaprabhu used to treat me so honorably for so long. He used to worship my feet. But now he's treating me like this. He has accepted me as his servant. He has accepted that I am eternally subordinate to him. This is my reward. His affection for me is so great that he wanted to save me from the hands of the Mayavadis and from falling into this ditch of Mayavad philosophy. So, hearing these statements, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt somewhat ashamed. Also, Advaita Prabhu's wife, Sita Thakurani, came out and she said, why are you beating him? You are a young man. He's an old man. Because at this time, Advaitacharya was in his 70s and Mahaprabhu was very young. And so she cried out, please, please stop. And then Mahaprabhu stopped and he smiled very bashfully and he said, you tricked me. And Advaita Prabhu was dancing around in ecstasy. See, it is described that as we heard, Advaita Prabhu appeared 52 years prior to Mahaprabhu's appearance. And when he came, he saw a world that was steeped in materialism. Now think about it. Almost 600 years ago, he saw that the world was steeped in materialism. What would Advaita Prabhu say when he sees the world today, which is far worse than what it was 600 years ago? But when he saw how degraded the people were, they worshipped wealth, they worshipped impersonal Brahman or Mayavad, but there was absolutely no worship of the Supreme Lord. All the worship that was done was ritualistic. It was for the purpose of getting more material wealth or attaining a position. that I'm a great scholar. Everyone should respect me, and I should make a livelihood from teaching so-called transcendental knowledge of Mayavad. And so this kind of behavior was prevalent. People spend money on lavish weddings and on enjoying their bodies, but there was no worship of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So Advaita Prabhu was very distressed, and he started loudly praying to Krishna to appear on this earth to save the conditioned souls that were here. So, and not just at the time that they were here, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, Advaita Prabhu, prayed for Krishna to appear as the Yuga avatar, or as the avatar who comes to teach the principles that are relevant for this age. And Krishna then appeared as Advaita Prabhu. So that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was referencing when he was beating Advaita Prabhu and saying, "You are saying all this? You cried out and you worshiped me to come down, and now you're saying I don't have a form and you're denying my existence." So that was the background. So Advaita Prabhu manifested his presence on earth for 125 years, the same number of years that Lord Krishna was present on this earth. That was 5,000 years ago. Like Krishna, Advaita Prabhu displayed the three phases of youth: Kaumara, that is childhood, excuse me, Pauganda, that is boyhood, and Kaishora, youth. But unlike Krishna, who is eternally in that young age, Advaita Prabhu also displayed Yauvana, which is adulthood, and Vardhakya, or transcendental old age. Now, Advaita Prabhu, we heard, is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So he doesn't get old like we get old. We get old and decrepit and our bodies start falling apart, our minds become weak. But Advaita Prabhu, even in his transcendental old age, was glowing, effulgent, and youthful. But Vaishnava Acharyas, because he displayed that transcendental phase of his life called Vardhakya, or transcendental old age, they allow Advaita Prabhu to be displayed with a great white beard and is displayed as older. So if you see pictures of Panchatattva, the five forms that we talked about that Krishna appears in, Advaita Prabhu is shown with a white beard. His origin is most mystical. His mother, Labhadevi, she saw Sadashiva, the original form of Lord Shiva, in a dream. He foresaw, that is Lord Shiva, in this dream, he could see the advent of the godless age of Kali. And he was feeling very sorry for all the souls who would take birth in this age. And so he felt great compassion in his heart. He went to the causal ocean where Karunadakshayi Vishnu, or Mahavishnu, is lying in mystic slumber. And Lord Shiva, Lord Sadashiva, the original form of Shiva, started beseeching Mahavishnu to show his mercy upon the living entities of this world. Realizing that the Lord is pleased by sacrifices, Sadashiva performed severe austerities for 700 years. Seeing Sadashiva in such a deep mood of compassion, Mahavishnu appeared to him. He woke up and he appeared to him. And he said, "Why are you performing such severe austerities to attain me? You and I are one." And in fact, Bhagavatam describes how Sadashiva is a different form of Krishna, and Prabhupada describes it as yogurt and milk. They are in one sense similar, but they're not the same. So Mahavishnu said, "You and I are one. Why are you doing such severe austerities to attain me?" And Sadashiva told him, "Unless you empower me to save mankind in the age of Kali, how can I do it, my Lord?" And hearing this selfless question and seeing the compassion of Sadashiva, Mahavishnu embraced Sadashiva. And by their shared compassion, they took one form. So this is all what Advaita Prabhu's mother, Labhadevi, saw in her dream. And then this manifestation took the form of Sri Advaithacharya when he appeared in her womb in the year 1434. And as we heard, Advaita Prabhu prayed, beseeched Krishna to come down to this world, and, and Krishna came as Mahaprabhu. And the reason we are in this divine mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and we are practicing Krishna Bhakti is because Sri Advaita Prabhu prayed for all of us in Kali Yuga. He is described as the efficient cause of Lord Chaitanya's appearance on this earth. And it's by his prayers and direct blessings that somehow or the other we've all come to this divine mission. Sri Advaita is the one who desired most intensely for everyone in this age of Kali to be delivered. And even though he is Mahavishnu and Sadashiva himself, he prayed for the original Godhead Sri Krishna to descend and propagate the path of deliverance for this degraded age, which is the path of Harinam or Harinam Sankirtana. So at every step, Sri Advaita actively served with Nityananda Prabhu and other associates of Sri Chaitanya to facilitate the Lord's pastimes and to propagate the path of Sankirtan to all. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes in Adi Leela that Mahaprabhu expanded or propagated this movement of Sankirtana through Advaitacharya. So on this day, we can pray to Sri Advaithacharya to engage us in the service of his beloved Lord Gauranga and his beloved friend Lord Nityananda and their devotees. And that will be the cause of our deliverance, of our eternal happiness. This is the most amazing part, that in the age of Kali, that the most degraded people can come to the highest path of bhakti simply because the great personality Sri Advaita desired and prayed for the Lord to come as Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and deliver us all through this mission of Sankirtana. So I would like to end with a most touching story that's narrated by a devotee who was a pujari in Advaitacharya's home in Advaitacharya Prabhu's temple in Shantipur in Bengal. And this story is described in this wonderful book by Mula Prakriti Devi. You can look it up. It's called Our Srila Prabhupada, A Friend to All. She painstakingly interviewed early contemporaries of Srila Prabhupada, people who had known him since his householder days, in his early days of ISKCON. She interviewed them and she put it down in the form of this book. It's a spectacular book. You will be moved and you'll be inspired by reading the stories in this book. So there is that one story where she interviewed this pujari. So he used to serve in Advaita Bhavan in Shantipur for several decades actually. And he came to Mayapur's ISKCON temple in 1980, clutching a copy of Back to Godhead magazine, which contained an article about our Srila Prabhupada. And Mula Prakriti Devi recorded it. So I would like to tell that story. So in the house of Advaitacharya, the three lords would meet. Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Sri Advaitacharya would meet and plot how to spread this Sankirtana movement to everyone. And in the 40s, 1940s and 50s, so this was about 2 decades after Srila Prabhupada had first met his own guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. And it was about 2.5 decades before Srila Prabhupada embarked on his journey to go to the West on board the Jaladuta. So in the 40s and the 50s, this pujari at Advaita Bhavan, he would notice a regular householder, he would come and chant quietly, but very intensely on his beads in the temple. This man, he would sit in the back of the temple room and he would not talk to anyone. He would just sit for hours and hours and chant on his beads. And he would come on a weekend, sometimes once a month, sometimes once every 2 months. And so the pujari would see him and something about him attracted him, but he would not go and disturb him or talk to him. But this man, he would always come at the end of his many hours of chanting in Advaita Bhavan. He would come and thank the Pujari. And the Pujari would see the intensity with which he chanted. And sometimes he would notice that his eyes would be full of tears as he was chanting. And then this man didn't come for some years. And then in August of 1965, this Pujari, he noticed his old friend again in the same place, in the same temple of Advaithacharya's home, Advaita Bhavan. This time, that household man was not a householder anymore. He was in saffron and he was in the robes of a sannyasi, and he was weeping constantly as he was chanting on his beads. And he was chanting with so much intensity, and he was weeping and weeping, even more so than he used to when he would come as a Grihastha man in the 40s and the 50s. So he was there most of the day, and as evening came, he got up to leave. The Pujari approached him and asked him who he was. And here, with your permission, I would like to briefly read a passage from Mula Prakriti Devi's book. It's extremely moving. This sannyasi who was weeping for so many hours, this is August of 1965. When asked who he was, he replied, "My name is Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. I am an unworthy disciple of His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, my Divine Master. I have been coming here for such a long time because my Gurudev has given me an impossible mission. His desire was for me to go across the ocean to the Western countries and spread the sublime teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are countless souls there who have never heard of Sri Sri Radha Krishna, and so they are suffering greatly. I have not known how this mission of his will be successful. So over the years, I have been coming here to this special house of Advaithacharya, where Advaita, Nityananda, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would gather together to plan the Sankirtana movement. It was here that they launched the inundation of love of God that swept India and continues to this day. Thus, I've been praying very earnestly here that they will all give me their mercy, that somehow they will empower me and guide me. I want to satisfy my Gurudev's desire, but I'm feeling unqualified to do this." So the Pujari continued, "As he was speaking to me, I saw tears falling down on his cheeks again. Then he continued, tomorrow I am leaving for Kolkata to go upon a ship across the ocean to America. I do not know what will befall me there, but I'm praying most earnestly here for help." Then Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada very humbly asked the Pujari for his blessings, and the Pujari said he was very moved by this Vaishnava's sincerity and determination as he watched him depart upon his journey. And then several years later, this Pujari saw that Western non-Indian people had started coming to Advaita Bhavan and were in dhoti and kurta, they were in tilak, they had beads, they were doing kirtan, they were chanting japa on their beads, and they were sincere, wonderful Vaishnavas. And then one of them gave him a Back to Godhead magazine, which had an article on our Srila Prabhupada. And when he saw him, he started jumping up and down. And he ran to ISKCON Mayapur's temple and talked to the devotees. And he said, he did it. He said, he's been coming to Advaita Bhavan. He was coming for decades. And from so long ago, he was praying and meditating on the order of his Guru Maharaj. And he came to beg for the blessings of Advaita, Nityananda, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he has actually done it. And it's very telling that literally just before Srila Prabhupada set sail on the Jaladuta, on August 13th, 1965, I believe, he went to Advaita Bhavan and he prayed so that he could come and share this divine mission with all of us and deliver us. And so today, here we are, And so many people have been touched by this movement, Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana mission, and so many more people are coming and will come in the thousands of years to come. Srila Prabhupada said that the golden age that was predicted in Shastra, 10,000 years of Kali Yuga, starting with the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for those 10,000 years, the books that Srila Prabhupada wrote and the example and the teachings that he gave us will be the law books for this age of Kali. And after these 10,000 years are over, the full darkness of Kali Yuga will descend upon this world. So, on this divine day, let us earnestly and sincerely pray to Sri Advaithacharya to first of all fully embrace these principles of bhakti into our own lives, to lead a life in accordance with the teachings of Sri and to help this divine mission. So we owe our spiritual lives to the compassion of this great personality who appeared today, Sri Advaitacharya, and his desire to intervene spiritually in all our lives. Om Tat Sat, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Advaitacharya Prabhu ki jai.